Hello, Pod Squad. Welcome to our very first episode of Doing Democracy Daily. I am your host, Kaitlyn, with our co-host here,
Logan.
And we're going to be chopping it up about democracy. And these microphones not connected to nothing. And our propaganda posters back here that I hope you like. And we also have our sound box. So, if you hear a little, don't be surprised.
Wi-Fi.
So,
Damn, that was long.
So we're going to start off first with our question, what is democracy in theory? And I just wanted to, bring up the fundamentals of democracy. So that's just equal and fair representation within your government, the power lying within the people, and just the overall fairness that comes with democracy and how that groundwork has been laid out throughout the United States. So I want to ask you here, what is the ideal democracy that you see in theory?
Well, it's a hard question. I mean, democracy has existed for centuries now. It's not like the United States invented it by any means. It goes all the way back to the ancient people in Greek and Roman times. So I think the ideal democracy is one where all the people have an equal and fair say, and all of the representatives vote based off of the opinions of the people who voted for them.
I also think talking about democracy in theory is hard to do so without bringing up the other framework of a republic, which is, the concept where there are representatives that go to these legislative processes and they vote on your behalf, basically, in what you say. So we can see this occurring today in the House of Representatives and senators and presidents. So obviously, a true democracy in theory can't really function in the United States without the use of a republic coexisting.
Yeah.
Which, pretty directly leads us to our next question on what is democracy in practice. So we can see this, like he said, in both historical times and in recent times. So throughout history, in places like ancient Rome and Greece, we can see, that democracy worked pretty well and in its truest forms in these, societies. But, at some point, whenever your societies grow too large, this pure form of democracy really isn't possible anymore, since there's just so many people that you can't really get the opinion of every single one while also maintaining a form of just success and proficiency within your government.
I think it's also an important question to ask for the United States in particular of were they really practicing an actual democracy in theory when the country was founded? Because Constitution says that all men are created equal, but that doesn't include women, and women didn't have the right to vote back then, as well as people who weren't white. So is that really equal representation in that democratic system?
Right. And this also ties back to, the idea of republic too, because those same minorities weren't able to run for office and be the representatives for their communities, even though, white men in America only accounted for, 1/3, 1/5 of the population back then. So it's really hard to have a true form of a representative democracy when, in early America, they didn't have that. But we can still see the ideas of democracy expand as we progressed further in American history. And like today, everybody has the right to vote, the right to run for office. Yeah, they have equal representation within our government.
And the representation is certainly improved, and it's enabled a lot more people to participate in the government system. But it still certainly has its flaws as well.
Right. We can see, as our population continues to grow and as more people get the right to express their opinion within our government, it becomes harder since our population has grown so much. And it's really difficult to get a clear-cut opinion from every single American on a certain issue without giving up some level of proficiency and speed when passing legislation. It makes me think of how the federal government is running right now. It kind of seems like a lot of people don't have control or don't have a say in what type of legislation is being passed and how these arguments are playing out in DC.
And it's very different on the federal and state level as well, which is something that we've kind of seen firsthand, which we had the opportunity to do, to travel to Santa Fe for a week and experience the end of the legislative session in the Roundhouse. So did you have any thoughts on how you felt in democracy before you went there and after?
Yeah, well, I do think it's important to mention first that whenever we were talking to some of the representatives and staff, they all said that the end of the legislation is whenever, bills are starting to get passed and things are starting to get rushed through so that we can get as many things done as possible. So I think the perspective that we got is much more efficient and I'd say successful in terms of democracy, because we can see these representatives, fighting for what their constituents want and passing these legislations that they think will benefit their community. So I think in that sense, democracy was at its peak and was most efficient. And they were saying at the beginning of the legislative session, it was more so thanking their sponsors and, thanking all the committees for the awards they got and stuff like that. I can't remember exactly what they said, but I think, in that sense, democracy isn't really working as they're kind of just doing stuff in their self-interest. But I do think that they did offer some unique perspectives on how they think democracy is functioning in the state, which I think
I found it to be a very valuable experience, and it gave me a lot of optimism for how our government functions at the state level. They had a lot of positive experiences and interactions with people who worked there year-round and just as representatives. But like you said, at the end of the legislative session, it was really rushed, and the legislators were there sometimes all night up into the early hours of the morning trying to pass bills right at the end. So do you think that that's a flaw of our local state government, that we have such short sessions, at these 30 days?
And I do think that they should be extended in some circumstances because, having such a short session, you really have to rush through these things. And I know some of the representatives said that whenever they find a bill that they don't think would get passed through the committee in an efficient amount of time, they'll just throw it out. So towards the end of the legislative session, they kind of just go towards a thing that would be pretty nonpartisan so that they could get as much done as possible, which I don't think is really a true form of democracy, because you're not doing what the constituents want you to do, and you're not passing stuff that really matters within the state. So I do think by extending these legislative sessions that we could get, more efficient legislation passed. Not to say that the ones that are being argued aren't, but I do think that there are bigger issues at hand that I think the state could address but doesn't.
Yeah, it definitely raises a lot of questions, and it is an issue in current local politics. It's something that some of the gubernatorial candidates have put into their proposed policies, that they would extend the legislative sessions to be longer and ideally more efficient. But even with the short amount of time they have, they did get a lot done, and that's something we saw and heard firsthand from a couple of interviews that we had with representatives in Santa Fe. So we'll start by showing one with Representative Joanne Ferrari from District 37.
Hi, it is Kaitlyn and Logan, and we are here with Representative Ferrari. If you'd like to, if you'd like to give a brief introduction.
Yes, I'm Joanne Ferrari. I'm state representative for House District 37 in Las Cruces.
Okay, so we'll start off with, what is democracy to you?
That's a really big question. Democracy to me means that people's voices are heard and decisions are made to protect people's freedom of the basics, like freedom of religion, and be able to have free speech, and rights. Most importantly to me have been environmental rights that will protect people, the air, land, and water, so that we can thrive. Democracy means having education and housing and opportunities.
Great.
Right. Thank you. And your occupation, besides this, is currently listed as retired. But in what you've done in your career in the past, how has democracy affected that field?
I've worked a lot for traffic safety, and to protect people, to fight for victims' rights, and to support victims of DWI, or and then it's grown as a legislator to protect rights of people as victims of sexual assaults, and to make sure that people will be able to have some kind of recourse if something happens to them, and also for prevention, for like alcohol. I've worked hard for alcohol tax initiatives that has proven to be one of the most effective things to do to prevent underage drinking and binge drinking. And so I think those kinds of things are really important.
Yeah, and how would you say that democracy plays a role in that type of legislation?
Well, it means that people have to listen to legislators. Leadership has to listen to what's best for everyone, not just for corporations. I know we have a lot of things that are considering private equity investments that are impacting not only healthcare, but also for housing, and big corporations not keeping in check for air quality or using water, such as Project Jupiter. There's things that can happen, but you also have to consider the impacts on everyone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any more questions?
What motivated you to become a legislator and participate in democracy so much more than just voting?
It's started when I was working with Move On as a coordinator in Las Cruces, and seeing how people together could have a bigger voice. Mm-hmm. And so having worked with Move On, and then meeting other people who've worked on campaigns, like at presidential campaigns, and then especially with the Obama campaign in 2008, meeting other like-minded people, and then the opportunity. They were searching for someone to run against the Republican incumbent. And so I was able to step up and run. I came close with only 8 votes between us for my first time to run for office. And then I ran again in 2014, but there was a big downturn in Democratic voters. So we lost the House, and other legislators who were already elected also lost. So I didn't feel so bad, but it encouraged me to go ahead and run again for the 3rd time in 2016. And that's when I won.
That's great. Your last question, Duncan. So how would you say democracy needs change, or there's room for improvement as far as like Las Cruces or just the state in general?
I think getting it so that legislators are paid is going to make a big difference for the people who are able to then afford to run for office.
Yeah.
I've been in a great situation since my husband and I are both retired. We get Social Security and, retirement from different jobs. But a lot of young women that we're encouraging, especially to run for office, it's going to be harder for them to work at their jobs and to maybe lose that income while they're serving. And so I think that would be encouraging for a lot of people, to run for office, to stay in office, and make it so that that process is a lot better, running. And I think also making sure that our leadership isn't influenced so much by big corporations, oil and gas. A lot of our budget depends on, the taxes and the money that oil and gas pays to use our land and our resources, which is fair. But for them to influence and to, stop different protections for people, such as the Green Amendment, environmental rights, that we wanted to try and get through for the past 5 years. Some of those things make it so that the voices of people aren't listened to as much as they should. It should be people over big, powerful corporations and money, of course.
So you said that perfectly. So we thank you again for taking the time out of your busy day to let us get an interview.
My pleasure. I'm glad we could work it out.
So let's give a hand to Joanne Ferrari. So I think Joanne offered a really good insight into our state democracy not being super efficient. So she mentioned obviously the fact that state legislators aren't being paid, and this is all in their own free time. And I think that's really important to discuss because, in some of these instances, you don't really get a fair representation for your county or your district. And whenever we were in Santa Fe, pretty much everyone told us that you can only run for office if you're rich, retired, and resourceful. And I think that really draws out a lot of the New Mexican population. It doesn't give firsthand experience to these legislators that they need in order to pass legislation for people in order to be efficient and actually impactful for the average New Mexican. Yeah. And these sentiments were echoed by Representative Raimundo Lara. He is the representative for District 34 here in Doña Ana County. So here's that.
Okay, so Hello, podcast. We are here with Representative Lara. If you would like to give a brief introduction and background.
Hi, everyone. Yes, my name is Ray Lara. I represent House District 34 in Southern Diana County. I represent the historical communities of San Miguel, La Mesa, Chamadillo, and La Union. And I also represent the communities of Sunland Park and Santa Teresa.
Yeah, so our first question for you is, what is democracy to you?
Democracy to me is the ability for the everyday person to be able to be part of their government and how government works. That's one of the things that I believe very strongly in it, and I think it's something that should be really preserved. I think it should be preserved, and I think it should be something that's really ingrained in how we do things as a society.
Yeah, that's great. In careers that you've had in the past, how has democracy affected them?
So I haven't had that many careers, but the one that I'm in now is education. So democracy is very important in education because we have an obligation to teach our young people government, how it works, the function of government, and how they can be active participants in that process. You know, when I was growing up, we had the Schoolhouse Rock videos, I'm just a bill and that kind of stuff. And that's what, as growing up, that's where we learned some of those things at a very young age. And I believe that influenced me, really, honestly, to tell you the truth. I believe that influenced me. And, but with the schools and public education, I think it's so important. Civics education is really important, social studies, because you will find, and I don't know if you'll be surprised or not, but there's a lot of people that really don't know how government works. Yeah, they don't know what the bill process is. They don't know who their representative is. They don't know who their senator is, and so that's something that I think we really need to bring back and emphasize in public education, is that role the government plays and how the students can learn how it works, and then thus becoming part of the process. Absolutely.
So how do you think democracy works differently here in the state compared to federal government?
In New Mexico, we're very, how can I say this? In New Mexico, it's very relationship based. So you build relationships with folks and you use those relationships to either advocate for what you want, advocate for your community, to form not necessarily coalitions, but to make sure that you have people on the same wavelength that you're on. Because I always emphasize the relationships, because for example, just I just met you both today, but you're from NMSU. I have a good relationship with NMSU. I graduated from NMSU, so there's that relationship, even though we just met a few minutes ago. But there was that relationship. You come representing my university, your university, and that's what honestly opened the door. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what opened the door. And saying that I have two students that want to come talk to me from NMSU. Sure, it's a no-brainer. Let's talk to me, because of that relationship that I have with the university and with many people who work there, and students at NMSU students that come to see me. So that's what that relationship is, and that's what allows these type of things to grow as democracy in New Mexico, as opposed to the DC politics. I think those are very I may be wrong, but I believe they're very adversarial. It's this side and that side. There's a little bit that spills over here with us, but I think for the most part, I believe that we're good neighbors, and that we all want the same thing for New Mexicans. And I think that's the difference between what's happening, the bipartisanship and the rhetoric and all the nastiness in Washington, as compared to here in the White House.
And even, like you said, some of that rhetoric spills over into the media, into local politics. Would you say that actually working in it, is it really that bad here locally?
So I would, if you would ask somebody else, they probably would say yes, but I don't believe so. I think even though my colleagues on the other side of the aisle may pick up on some of that rhetoric, that national rhetoric, it doesn't hold water in New Mexico, because I believe that New Mexicans, we really see things for what they are, and that we are able to really distinguish, what's really happening as to what the rhetoric is. And so I think, once again, that's part of the beauty of New Mexico is, we understand that we're neighbors. We understand that we're working towards the common goal of bettering the life for New Mexicans. And I think that's what kind of separates the work that we do here as opposed to the national level. And like I mentioned before, some of that rhetoric does spill in. I heard some of that last night. And, it's I don't want to say it's ignored, but it's not acknowledged. If it's not acknowledged, it's not validated. So I think, yeah. So that's what I think that really helps us or makes us different here, at least in the House. Even though people may say things, I don't believe that it's true. But at the same time, during the debate, it's not personal. It's never personal. What gets debated on the floor is not personal, and I think we all know that,
Right.
and that allows us to continue to work together with our colleagues from the other side of the aisle.
Yeah. Thank you. And our last question, the one you noticed, is if there were any changes that you could envision being made to the way our local democracy functions, what might they be?
So I thought about this, and I came up with there's been a lot of discussions about, as you know, I think we are the last state in the nation that does not pay lawmakers.
No.
And I think democracy works if regular people or anybody can have the opportunity to become a lawmaker. For example, when I first decided to jump into this realm, I was advised or told by one of my more experienced colleagues that Ray, you have to follow the 3 R's, or you have to be part of the 3 R's. You have to be rich, retired, or something. Well, I'm not the first two for sure, right? So I figured I have to. So fortunately, my job allows me to do this.
Sure.
But at the same time, by our legislature being a volunteer legislature, it really, really limits who can and cannot participate in this.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel very strongly that if we professionalize the legislature and provide a living wage to people who want to be part of this process, I truly believe that it's going to open up the pool more, and we'll have many more people, or just what I would call regular people, that want to make a difference, and they can run for the position because they can earn a salary that they'll be able to pay rent or mortgage or to provide for their children. And I think that then truly I believe we would become more of a representative governing body if that was in place.
The same. Yeah.
Yeah, we spoke to Representative Kadena yesterday, and she had mentioned whenever she started, she was only one of 2 working mothers in the whole Senate and House. So I agree that it would be a good thing to have more of a diverse delegation.
No, I agree, and but at the same time, there's some powers that be that don't want that. They want to maintain control. So I think I would love to see more young people here, more working class people, immigrants. Maybe to truly show what are the people in New Mexico look like. And I think it's good. I think we're very fortunate we passed that joint resolution, and so it's going to go forward. It's going to be on the ballot, and for the voters to decide whether the legislature should be paid or not. Yeah. So I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be interesting.
That was House Joint Resolution 5.
Yes, I think so. Yes.
So anybody watching, you know what to vote for in this upcoming.
Yes, and remember, you only have to be 21 to run for House of Representatives, and you have to be 25 to run for the Senate.
Yeah. And it'd be excellent, like you said, to have a more representative body.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's going to be key to the future of the state.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
You taking the time out of your day, because I know it gets pretty hectic here.
No, thank you. I appreciate you reaching out to me. And once again, thanks for the work that you do. And I wish you the best in the future in your studies, and hopefully you'll stay in New Mexico.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you to Representative Lara. And we do really want to thank both representatives for giving up their time for us to speak with them and for all of the service that they provide to the public. It's greatly appreciated.
Yeah, towards the end of the legislative session, it was really hard to reach out and make time. So we really appreciate all their efforts to talk to us and talk to you guys and give, more insightful opinions about the legislator than we can.
Yeah, but again, the representative mentioned that their position really is not paid. One of the things that we learned from research is that they do receive a per diem of, I believe, roughly $200 per day, but Santa Fe can be a very expensive place to live, rent, or find a hotel for 30 days. Sometimes even up to 60 days. So it doesn't really cover the costs of living in two places at once and having a family at the same time. So it's a really big barrier for working class people whose jobs won't allow them to take 2 months at a time off to be able to travel out there and work in this position.
We also spoke to Representative Cadena. We weren't able to get that one on film, but she did offer some really interesting insights into how she became a legislator. So whenever she first ran, she had 2 kids, was that?
I believe so.
Yeah, she had 2 really young kids, and it was really hard for her to, raise kids, make enough money to support them, and also be a legislator. And I think it really goes to show how limiting this position can be for representatives and how it's hard for people with families to come through this position. So I do think that helping financially with our legislators would be helpful so we can get a more diverse legislator.
In kind of closing on that thought, I do think that it isn't maybe truly representative of the reality of New Mexico population, the staff that we have there. But on the other side of that coin, a lot of the representatives, I would say probably all of the people that we spoke to, felt really genuine and really cared about the success and prosperity of New Mexico.
Yeah, I feel like that sentiment was, expressed even through staff and assistants. They all really cared about their job, and they all really wanted what was best for New Mexico, even though they're not getting paid to do this job. So
there is definitely right now an aspect of selflessness from the representatives.
Yeah. Let's give a round of applause for all the staffs and assistants who work at the state legislature.
So, again, I found it to be an incredibly optimistic experience from everything that I learned there.
Definitely. Yeah. So, now that we talked about some of the pros and some of the cons of democracy in our state legislature and in our federal government, how do you think democracy is good or bad for our government?
Well, I think it's better than a lot of other options. And you can definitely make the case that there are issues with the implementation of the system that we have, but I think that would go for any government system that you tried to implement on such a large scale. It's a huge, huge country, and it has a lot of territory, a lot of people. So finding a government system that can function at maximum efficiency is very, very difficult.
Yeah. And I also think it's important to know, what is a successful government? This is kind of going into more like a political theory, which is, deeper than what's required. But what do you define as a successful government?
Yeah, I think it depends on what the people want, which I suppose is kind of a democratic notion. But now the health, safety, and security of the residents of the government would be one important aspect of the way I would define it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people in the United States especially measure their success through the economy and income, which, is an important aspect in regard to, health, safety, security, and even just in an international affairs perspective. It's really important to have a flourishing economy, but it's definitely not the most, the only thing that's important to a successful government. And I do agree that, health, safety, and wellness of the population should be, one of the top priorities to make a successful government.
Overall, do you think that democracy is the best, or a democratic republic is the best type of government that we could have right now?
I'm not too sure about the republic part of that, because, it kind of consolidates power to a certain group of people. I do think that there should be more control for the people within our government. And I think that process can be, implemented through more voting. And I know, voting is such a exhaustive process, because we have talked to Secretary of State and
Donana County Clerk.
Yes. And we know that process can be very difficult, but I do think it is important to get the opinions of people, even on just small issues, and, really make voices heard. But that's in an ideal world where, it's fast and efficient. But I feel like that's how everything with government systems goes. I know for socialism, it's the idea that it only works in practice, or only works in theory, but not in practice. So I feel like that could also be applied similarly to, a democratic republic or whichever other government system that is implemented.
Yeah, I think so far we've learned a lot taking this course, and with all of the experiential learning and things we've had so far. And I'm optimistic about the future of at least our state government.
Yeah, as am I. I'm really proud to be a New Mexican, and I'm really proud of what our legislator has done. And, I'm really excited to see for the future of New Mexico.
Yeah. But in closing, I wanted to thank the representatives that spoke to us again, Representative Ferrari-Amato, and everyone in Santa Fe and Dominguez County so far who's had the time and grace to speak with us. And we look forward to learning more throughout the rest of the semester.
Yeah, so make sure you like, comment, subscribe, so that you can see more of Doing Democracy on the daily, because we're the bomb. Okay. Thank you guys. Bye.
Thank you.